On August 10, 1985, Japanese arcade cabinet manufacturer Taito released the game The Legend of Kage, which was then ported to various home consoles over the next couple of years. The game is a hack-and-slash beat-em-up where you play as the titular ninja, Kage, translated as Shadow. You are tasked with rescuing the shogun's daughter, Princess Kiri, who has been kidnapped by ninjas. You must fight various enemies, including red and blue ninjas, with an array of weaponry, including your sword, shurikens, and your massive vertical jump that can propel you more than a screen high. The game was fairly well received on release in arcades, selling 6,000 kits, but the home console releases received more mixed to negative reviews. 19 years, 1 month, and 20 days later, submissions for the Retro Remakes Competition 04 closed. Retro Remakes was, at the time, the largest remaking community on the internet, at least according to their own website. There were 73 entries submitted, and after a month of judging, the winner was declared: a GameMaker remake of Legend of Kage, anglicized to Legend of Shadow, by user Darth Loopy. Legend of Shadow starts the same as the game it remakes. You begin in a forest, and some ninjas run by with a box and kidnap the woman you're with, in this version your girlfriend, or special lady friend, as the sandbox blurb expertly puts it. From the start, though, the game sets itself apart from the original in subtle ways. The character is much smaller compared to the game world, which allows much more action to occur on screen at a time, at the cost of it being harder to keep track of what's going on sometimes. Rather than the bounding, uncontrolled jumps of the original, Legend of Shadow has, well, still bounding jumps, but these are controllable in midair, as is more standard for the GameMaker games at the time, and due to the smaller character sprite, we can now jump dozens of feet in the air without a second thought. The enemies in the game carry over relatively unchanged, although shout out to these flamethrower guys in hats who are way more challenging than in the arcade or NES versions. Several power-ups also carry over from the NES version of the game, including special shurikens and a terrifying scroll that turns the sky black and kills any enemy who dares appear on the screen. But Shadow also introduces several special shuriken types, such as boomerang and four-way ones, and limits their number rather than having the power-up last forever, which encourages rationing the limited ammo. I say encouraging, but I always just spam them anyway, I mean, come on. After the first level, the environments too begin to differ from the arcade game. In the original Legend of Kage, there are 4 levels that play on a loop. I will note points where Legend of Shadow draws from these, but the levels are almost wholly separate, including several bosses that do not appear in the original game. After completing the forest area, we are greeted with one of these boss fights. This guy can block all of your attacks with his weapon, so you have to wait for him to throw it, then attack him while dodging it. It's a pretty enjoyable little fight. After this, we enter a cave. This maze-like area has floor spikes and fallen boulders to dodge, as well as normal ninja nuisances. There's also this one room that has 3 fire guys in it. I die every time. The biggest challenge in this area is definitely navigating all the near-identical rooms without getting lost. The background is also an extremely similar color to the ninja enemies, so they can be pretty hard to see, but usually if you just spam shurikens into the room before you go too far, you'll be fine. After eventually finding the key, I think, and getting out of the maze of tunnels, we emerge into a misty area with a super buff guy who starts hurling bombs at us. He always blocks our attacks, and I believe is immune to shurikens as well, so the only reliable way to do any damage is tricking him into walking into his own bombs, which is a bit easier said than done. Still, if you can get a good rhythm going of jumping over the explosions, it's not too difficult of a fight. Eventually, the guy falls down dead, and an arrow prompts us to the next area. This is the second area so far that draws inspiration from the arcade game. It's a vertical jumping section where you are beset on all sides by ninjas and need to reach the top of a castle. It's not too hard once you realize that you can just hold the jump key to essentially automate leaping up the countless floors, leaving you to spam slash and shurikens to ward off the waves of enemies. My main gripe for this area is that the shade of gray in the background makes shurikens essentially invisible, which isn't a big issue for your shurikens, but makes dodging those thrown by enemies next to impossible. Eventually, we reach the summit of this tower and find this flying guy with fireball powers. Still not as good as the hat guys, though. For this fight, you basically need to dodge all of his attacks until he's low enough to hit, then wail on him until he moves out of reach again. Pretty standard stuff. You can also just fire shurikens upwards, which I forgot until dying on this fight a bunch of times. Once you beat him, he plummets out of the sky and you enter the castle. Boy, I hope they remembered to put in the flooring. Oh, wait. While plummeting down the shaft, you have to dodge and deflect numerous projectiles from below until you can finally reach the bottom and kill everybody. After this, you exit the castle, presumably mere feet from where you entered it, and continue on to a village section. This part is most similar in gameplay to the forest section, jumping between rooftops and dodging ninjas and these fire guys. Eventually, we reach a doorway and finally locate our imprisoned paramour, chained to a large stone in a room full of cherry blossoms. With her is a black-clad ninja. As we enter, he bows before summarily cracking open a fresh can of whoop-ass. Why did I write it like this in the script? This guy has a basically identical moveset to you, but with some power-up type abilities like triple shurikens. He can also turn invisible, making him very difficult to track, unless you follow his shadow. Wait, is that the legend of the shadow? Or is it just a translation of the Japanese protagonist's name? We may never know. Speaking of, a small complaint I have for this game is that there's no way to tell the health of the bosses, basically meaning you just have to spam them with attacks until they die with no sense of how close you are to that goal. I think if there was an old-style enemy health bar added to the UI like in Mega Man 2 or something, the bosses would be way more engaging and less potentially frustrating because you could actually tell if you were one hit away from killing them or 20. Anyway, after killing the Black Ninja, we can slash our girlfriend's chains, and we are treated to this very nicely drawn-in cutscene. We embrace our princess, oh, I guess his name is Shadow, and as the cherry blossoms fall around us, we are told that the land is now at peace, all thanks to us, and the credits roll. It's a nice old-style arcade you win screen, which I always loved. Legend of Shadow is obviously derivative of its source material, it is a remake after all, but it also succeeds in establishing its own identity beyond that, and frankly, having played a couple of versions of the original Legend of Kage researching this video, Legend of Shadow is a far better game. The areas are more diverse, each calling for its own type of gameplay without changing the core mechanics, and the bosses are each their own type of unique challenge. The graphics are, at times, a bit small, but they're immaculately drawn and animated. I remember first opening this game as a kid and marveling at the parallax in the forest section, being amazed that a Game Maker game could look this professional. I think it still holds up today for the most part, despite a couple places I noted earlier where the background can make it hard to see certain things in the foreground. Darth Loopy already had several acclaimed Game Maker titles under his belt at the time of making this, including the classic RPG Magecraft, as well as hosting the early Game Maker hub, GameMakerGames.com. He would go on to make The Cleaner, another very well-respected game in the community. We will surely see him again in this series. If you're a fan of old arcade hack and slashes, definitely check this one out. You can find it on the Yo-Yo Games Sandbox archive. The link is in the description. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.